Hello. Today we will discuss copyright in education. Some of you may have already heard information about copyright laws and what it is, but we will focus specifically on how it interacts with education. Our objectives today are aligned with the American Association of School Librarians. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to make ethical decisions in the creation of knowledge by ethically using and reproducing others' works, and acknowledging authorship and demonstrating respect for the intellectual property of others. Our goal is that you will be able to recognize why copyright is important, why it should be followed, and understand your own responsibility to do so. However, before we dive too deep into our lesson, there are a few vocabulary words that you need to know. The first you should know, which is not listed here, is intellectual property. Of course, you all know that property is a physical thing that you can own. Well, intellectual property is an idea or creation that you own. Our first listed term, copyright, refers to the regulations that describe the manner in which an original work can be used and copied. That means that when it is created, it is protected by copyright laws, which explain how it can be used and distributed. Our next copyright word is fair use. Fair use is the basic criteria an educator can use to determine whether it is appropriate to use copyrighted materials in a classroom setting. This means that while everything is copyrighted, there are some guidelines that educators and students can follow to use copyrighted material without obtaining explicit permission from the material's owner. We will discuss this more in depth later. Attribution is another important word that means an act of attributing something or giving credit. This means we are going to accurately refer any material we use to the original creator. Finally, public domain. Public domain is the realm in which something belongs to the community at large. These are ideas or creations which anyone can use, free of charge and without permission. Understanding these terms will help us navigate the tricky world of copyright. So what is copyright? Copyright laws protect creative works. It defines how creations can be used, shared, and distributed. Everyone is protected by copyright law, even if their creations have not been formally registered with the US government. That means that if you create something, then it is automatically protected by copyright. Yes, that's right. Anything you create, whether it is a new song or a school assignment, is protected by copyright. This means that no one can copy, share, or distribute your work without your permission. So if you make an awesome project and a teacher wants to use it as an example for the next year, they need to ask your permission before they can show it, as it is your creation. This applies to everything, from movies, to music, to art, to video games, to essays, lectures, and even scientific studies. However, there are some things that cannot be copyrighted. Facts cannot be copyrighted, such as how many days are in a year or when the Declaration of Independence was written. Copyright applies to created works, or an idea that has been made into something. Facts are public knowledge, and everyone has a right to them. It is important to care about copyright because it is essential for continuing the flow of creative works in our society. Without protection, people may feel like their creations are vulnerable to being copied and distributed without credit. Everyone wants to get credit for their hard work and great ideas. If we did not have copyright and everyone was free to steal and share, then people would guard their creations much more fiercely, and society would lose out on experiencing a lot of amazing ideas. Copyright ensures that creators retain rights over their works and receive compensation, or something in return. What the creator receives is what they determine is fair for the labor they put into their work. When we protect the creative rights of materials, it encourages a positive, healthy flow of content that continues to inspire and enrich the world around us. Humans are communal. We rely on each other and each other's ideas to survive. We can't do that if everyone is hoarding their brilliance because they're afraid of it getting stolen. Now, you've probably heard of plagiarism, and you are probably thinking, copyright sure sounds a lot like plagiarism. I would just like to take a moment and explain the difference. Although these two things happen together often, they are not the same thing. Copyright is when you take someone else's work and distribute it without their permission, or in violation of their wishes for use. For example, if you record a band at a concert and then sell that recording online, you have taken and given their work away without their permission. Plagiarism is when you take someone else's work and pretend that it is your own. So that would be like recording yourself playing that band's music, saying that you wrote it. While both of these things are wrong, it is important to know the difference so that you can avoid doing either one. Now that you know what copyright is and how it is different from plagiarism, how do we know if we've violated copyright? Whether you violate copyright intentionally or accidentally, it is still a violation. Copyright violation happens when you copy or distribute content against the usage permissions granted by the owner of the content. This means that if you copy a DVD and sell it, you have violated copyright. If an image says that you can use it as long as you link back to the source and you post it without the source, you have violated copyright. Creators get to decide how their content is shared or if it can be shared, and when you ignore those permissions, you have violated copyright. This includes distributing copies of content for profit. If you are making money off someone else's work without permission, you are likely in violation of copyright. As mentioned, this includes copying a creative work, like a movie or an album, and then selling those copies. You should consider if your actions are reducing the financial value of a creator's work. If the answer to the question, if I distribute this, will the creator lose money, is yes, you are likely in violation of copyright law. Now, there are a few exceptions to copyright laws in education. Education is a nonprofit organization that uses materials for furthering knowledge and understanding. As such, it is given certain areas of flexibility in copyright law called fair use. Now, that doesn't mean that you can just use something, slap education on it, and call it fair use. There are guidelines you need to follow to determine if your use of material falls under educational fair use. First, you must ask yourself, what is the purpose of your usage? Are you using the material for education, such as to support an argumentative essay or illustrate your point in a presentation? Or are you using it for personal use? If you are using it for personal entertainment or commercial usage where you'll make money from it, then it is not fair use. If you are using it for entertainment, you will need to obtain permission before using it. For example, if your reading teacher shows a clip of characters from a movie and you are practicing analyzing characterization, that is educational. That is fair use. However, if the movie is being shown after an exam, then it is for entertainment and permission will need to be obtained. Secondly, you need to ask yourself, what is the nature of the content? If the content is largely factual, then you are free to use it. If it is a creative work, then you will need to think critically about how to use it and if you can. The next thing you need to figure out is that if you've determined it is a mostly creative work, you need to consider how much of the content you are using. If you're using more than is necessary to illustrate your point or enhance your creation, then you are probably falling outside the fair use guidelines. You should only use as much as is necessary for creation. You should only include relevant quotes, images, clips, or segments. If you play a full song or movie, then you are ultimately distributing someone else's creative work for free and are not doing so for an educational purpose. The last thing you should consider is the financial impact your actions are going to have on the creator. Will your work negatively impact the compensation the creator receives? Like in our previous example, showing a movie for free will prevent others from purchasing the movie, and this will decrease the sales of that creator's work. However, if you're only showing a clip, you're not reducing their sales by distributing their work for free. If you are not negatively impacting a creator or owner's compensation, then you are within the fair use guidelines. Some things exist outside of copyright and fair use, and anyone can use them without permission. These works that exist within the public domain. There is no comprehensive list from the government as to what works are in the public domain, so you will need to check the usage terms yourself. A good rule of thumb is that anything published in the United States before 1924 is in the public domain. So check that copyright date. Works created after 1924 can be given to the public domain by the creator if they so choose, and it will be expressed in the usage rights. So it is your responsibility to check the usage rights and find out if something is either in the public domain, has limited use, or that you have to obtain explicit permission to use it. Attribution is important because it is how you credit a creator for their work. If something is from the public domain, you do not have to attribute the work. However, if what you are going to use falls under the fair use guidelines, you will most likely need to attribute the work to its creator or its owner. Doing so allows other people to find the origin of a creative work so that the creator or owner can receive compensation for it. Many resources online will let you use their works as long as you attribute it to them. It is something that you must do for both school assignments and regular usage. Sometimes it can be as simple as linking back to the original source. Other times, you will need to follow specific guidelines. Some school assignments will likely require that you use certain citation guidelines. There are resources online that provide you with free-to-use images or other free-to-use material. These are great places to start. If you can find what you need in these locations, then you will reduce your risk of violating copyright. I recommend that you only move to the open web, that means using Google or another search engine, if you can't find what you need at resources such as these first. Pixabay is a free-for-use, no attribution required image website. Creative Commons is a content library with clear copyright information, ranging anywhere from free use, like Pixabay, to limited use with clear guidelines that tell you whether attribution is needed and what kind of attribution is needed. This Creative Commons does include pictures, and it has some music available. Creative Commons Public Domain is a library of digital content released to the public domain for use. So much like Pixabay, you wouldn't have to attribute the public domain images or other material that you find in the Creative Commons public domain. Here are a few references of places where I got my information for images for this presentation. This information could be considered attributions for the information that I use since it identifies the original sources. You'll also notice that throughout my presentation, I included attributions either under the information that I found or the images that I found. This is an important step in protecting copyright since it gives credit to the creators of the works or information that I referenced. This gives you a tool to learn more about what I talked about, and it gives the creators the credit that they deserve. You should always try to respect copyright law by making sure you attribute and source your information. If you ever have a question about whether or not you can use something because you can't find the licensing terms, you should always contact and ask the owners for permission.